Insert disc 2.
You know, a couple weeks ago I talked about how the YouTube
hate machine?
No, well, yeah, sort of. But the YouTube community, and especially the retro bunch, which is what I mainly watch, they all are like sharks. And when they see a fresh piece of meat in the water, they jump in there and start gnawing away, you know. And they all do it. So for a while, it was the PlayStation Portable or PlayStation Mini. They killed that. Then you also had your then the Neo Geo got some of that. And then you had your the 1-Up Arcade. And they got hammered. So this week, I don't know if you heard this, but and I'm not going to go into it because my point of this is not the item but the reaction to it. There's a rapper guy called Soulja Boy.
Yeah.
You ever heard of him?
He's got a console.
That's right. And this console, what Soulja Boy did for the uninformed was basically put his name on some Chinese, pirate consoles.
Sure.
You can buy them by the bushel. Mm-hmm. They've got tons of them out there. Now, I'll be honest with you. I don't know jack squat about Soulja Boy.
That shocks me.
I don't know. I mean, I think I may have heard his name. I don't know any songs he sings. Can you name any of his tunes?
No, I don't know anything about him.
All right. I like some rap stuff, but I don't know who he is. All right, I've heard his name. But this was the crap du jour this week for the YouTube retro community. Everyone had to put out as many videos as they could, as fast as they could, mm-hmm. on the Soulja Boy console. Mm-hmm. How ludicrous it was, how appalled they were, how he's going to get in trouble. Even guys I respect loaded up on this, and I'm going to give you an example. I get a lot of my news about the retro pie stuff from a guy called Mad Little Pixel. He's great. He's a great guy. I like all his videos, but this week, even this fella was going nuts on this Soulja Boy stuff. And then I listened to a video he put out I think it was last night, where he said, listen, he goes, I know a lot of you guys have lost sort of respect for me for all this Soulja Boy stuff. He goes, because I know it's not a real story and I'm just doing this. He goes, but I'm just trying to expand my channel. He was honest about it. And so I guess my question to you is, Boat, what do you think about jumping on this idiot stuff just solely on the basis of trying to get some action view-wise? I mean, this worries me, and because proliferates a lot of stupid information, a lot of Me Too shows, and so when you're like me and you're consuming some of this stuff, it gets old and it seems sort of pathetic. What do you think?
Well, we've never been at a better time to vote with our eyeballs. Back in the day, if something was on TV and you didn't like it, you didn't have much choice. The best thing you can do if this sort of thing makes you mad is to not click on the stuff in the first place. Yeah. One of the great things about content is that right there on the headline is, this is what I'm ranting about. The whole reason, what is his name? Mad Little Pixel?
Mad Little Pixel.
The whole reason why he did it, just like he said, was because people are searching for it. The more clicks he gets, the more money he makes. I didn't want to do any of that arcade 1-up stuff, but that's what people are talking about. I thought it was cool. It is interesting to talk about. I would have rather talked about something else, but the stuff that I like talking about, 80s wrestling, people aren't into that. They're not searching for it. And it does bring people into your channel when you talk about stuff that's in the zeitgeist, stuff that's in the mainstream.
Well, I enjoyed the arcade stuff because I find it interesting. And again, I thought the topic was...
It's also germane to our channel because we are a retro gaming channel. And that's the thing, like Mad Little Pixel, he's not talking about like President Trump getting impeached or something like that. It's still ancillary to his topic for his channel. So I'm not so angry about people that do stuff like that because it is a gaming story that is popular, that people do want to get people's takes on.
This falls into a bigger category. And I think about this occasionally. What are you doing this for? And I don't mean you in particular, I just mean in general. When you go out of your way, and we didn't start out on YouTube, this was we just sort of kind of rolled into it. We were doing podcasts, right? Podcast guys. And eventually we got into the YouTube scene. And we both learned, I think this is, no one's going to be stunned, that there's not a lot of money to be made on YouTube unless you're a monster.
Right.
All right. But people and they're swinging. They're trying to get it. So, but I mean, are people doing this? I mean, I wonder how many people start off like we did with a love of something. I don't know, just mean retro gaming, just cooking or whatever. And then at some point they were just like, well, time to fully sell out and just try to grow this channel.
Well, I think that there's a wide leap between time to grow my channel and time to fully sell out. You're connecting two dots that are very, very far apart.
Do you think there's a wide leap?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just,
It's like, it's like when we talk about anything that's Amiga news related, like Vampire and stuff like that. Like, if we never talked about the Vampire again, do you know how happy I'd be? I'd be ecstatic, but we've got to talk about it because we're a freaking Amiga show.
I like the Vampire.
Well,
I mean, I like
that makes one of us.
I like talking about it. I think it's I think the Vampire is it's an interesting. Not only is it an interesting piece of technology, but I think it's an interesting social experiment to watch people's reactions to where it falls.
Obviously, because we're talking about it again.
Yeah. I thought you wanted to. You brought it up.
Right. So, whenever you're doing anything that's related to something else, and you have any interest in getting more people to come watch your thing, you're going to have to do things that you don't want to do all the time.
I agree. I mean, I think you're. I mean, also when you're like we're a partnership,
right?
And then I'm hooked up with Brent on the other show, and was hooked up with you for a while, and you still come in and out, and so you have to sort of agree on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think we generally. I mean, I'm pretty easygoing, and you usually make the right call, so I pretty much defer to you. But it does bring a certain amount of. It brings two differing ways of doing things and ways of addressing stuff, and so it's probably a good thing because I like that. I kind of like some of the edgier situations with the Amiga community. I mean, I wish it all get together, but I mean, it's still interesting to look at and talk about. Whereas you're more of like into the Atari community, where there's a lot less infighting and a lot more. And by the way, they get a lot more done. Mm-hmm. By the way, and probably a more respected community. And it doesn't mean the Atari's better. It's just I don't know why it's like
a different community.
So we have a little bit of each one.
In truth be told, it's a much smaller community. I mean,
really,
yeah. Well,
I would think the Atari community was bigger.
No freaking way. The Amiga sold so many more units than the Atari. The Amiga was out for so much longer than the Atari. I mean, it was relevant for so much longer than the Atari was.
The Atari. I mean, it was out more recently and more.
Well, no, like the Atari came out in 1978, right. And its heyday was pretty much 78 to 85.
Right.
Okay. The ST and the Amiga came out in 85.
Right.
The Amiga was relevant from 85 to 95. It's like 10 years, 85 to 94 if you want to say when Commodore went out of business. But it was really even relevant beyond that. And over that time period, it sold so many because it was such a bigger thing in more countries. I mean, computers in general, the Amiga did have the advantage of coming out later in the life cycle of the home computer. But yeah, I mean, almost everything outsold the Atari. I mean, it's sort of the consensus, at least among the Atari community, that the Atari was the best, least successful of the major Atari or the major 8-bit platforms, that being C64, Apple II, and Atari.
I'm not saying you're wrong. But it does surprise me because it seems like the Atari guys that in the forums and that group, they do a lot of hardware, they do a lot of software, they do a lot of projects, and they are quoted a lot, and they're linked a lot. It seems like they have been around forever, and it seems like they're vast. I never really thought of the Amiga community as being vast.
Mm-hmm. And I think some of it might have to do with the fact that the 8-bit systems are easier for more people to get into and really do programming for. Like I did a little demo on the Atari 8-bit. Like I programmed it. I could never do anything remotely close to that on the Amiga.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's two different sides of the same coin for sure. But the Amiga side. The Atari side just seems, and maybe the smallness is part of it. Maybe it's easier to get organized, and you've weeded out some of the goofballs that are going to disrupt the community.
You also have fewer. Well, I don't know. It'd be kind of interesting because I was going to say you have fewer hardware internal modifications that you're dealing with, because you got the AC or the AGA and the OCS ESIS. You can't make one for the you don't have compatibility across the board. But with the Atari computers, you're really limited not so much through the processor, but the amount of RAM that came with.
Do you
each
think?
Model, so.
And again, I'm not here to crucify the Amiga community. A fine bunch. Always been nice to me, by the way. But do you think if a vampire-style gimmick came out for the Atari, I don't know, and let's say, this is nutty, it's never happened. Let's say an Atari FPGA thing came out to let the 400, 800, the 800 XL play ST games. It's something wacky like that. Do you think there would be a rift in the Atari community like there is in the Amiga? I'm trying to think of something.
That's a great question. It's so wacky that you almost can't even imagine it, because a lot of the demo, like the high-end demos that are appearing on the Atari 8-bit, are almost sort of like mini vampires in themselves, where you have this demo running off a cartridge where the cartridge has a processor on the cartridge, and the all it's doing is tapping into the video output of the Atari system itself. So there already are vampire-like things that are happening, but nobody really cares.
Really? Do you think it's just annoys me people using it and they don't? It's not that big a deal, because I'm telling you, you can't bring up. If I went to the Amiga Facebook group and just posted something that said basically like the vampire's great, you would have 200 people chiming on, and they do it every time.
I think it's part of it has to do with the fact that the vampire is it is a for-profit project. They are not they're not saying, oh yeah, like this is. I mean, they're saying this is a thing that you can buy. It's for sale. We've jacked around with the price. We've made it lower. We've made it higher. Nobody's really sure why. That plays a lot into it. When it's somebody doing a fan project like this Atari thing I was talking about, they're not out there trying to sell it to unsuspecting buyers.
So there's not a lot of people out there trying to make a buck.
I mean, there are people that are selling like homebrew software,
right?
But I think that's a different level of play than selling something that costs $400 or $500.
Because it's funny. Edition. Along these lines, we didn't mention this in the news, but I read an article this week, or saw a headline, and it was something to the effect that the outfit that was making that really slick-looking Amiga game front end. That a while back, and we actually covered it. Mm-hmm. They had shut down their project effectively, and apparently part of it was over problems with one of the Amiga rights holders, whichever one, you take your pick. I'd heard they were at least in negotiations with Calanto, so I don't want to finger Calanto.
And again,
did you hear about this?
Again, it's because they wanted to sell it.
Right.
And and that's really when you're trying to sell a product based on something that you don't actually own, then you've got problems.
Does Atari have the same sort of issue with because Atari didn't really have a Kickstart?
Right. You don't have that problem because Atari doesn't have a Kickstart. It's the BIOS that's built into the machine.
One would wonder, we've mentioned this before, when you come up with these nutty devices, just like the new Kickstart that came out that ended up getting taken off the market. Is there enough users to warrant this amount of angling for profit? I mean, how much profit are you going to make off this stuff? It just makes me wonder. I just watched an excellent documentary on the I think it's is it the Vega or what the ZX Spectrum handheld that came out, and it was just a disaster. It was very good. It was like an hour and a half long. And he went into all the trouble these guys got into and how much money they owed for this thing. And really, they had so few backers. And it made me think about the Amiga. How many people are out there that will buy this stuff? Is it worth even all the trouble?
Well, and that's part of the reason why I think it's expensive, is because they want to recoup not only their material costs, but the costs that they spent putting it together, developing the product and all that stuff. And because they're not going to be able to sell this to every person on the street, they have to make the profit. You have to charge more when the volume is lower, and that pisses the people that want to buy it off, because they think, well, all this is this. Why should it cost this much?
I was listening. Was it the Spectrum Next? Mm-hmm. I actually wanted to mention this to you real quick. We got time.
Oh yeah.
I was listening to Retro Gaming Roundup last week, and there's a fellow on there does a show called Dinosaur Pie. He's a graphics guy. I wish I could remember his name right off the top of my head. He's usually pissed off about stuff. I don't know. I don't necessarily think he's the best guy, but apparently he was a guy that did a lot of good art. He had some interesting topic slants. But he got into talking about the audience that will be available for the Spectrum Next when it finally ships. It's another project that's been besieged with delay after delay, and it was supposed to be out already. It still hasn't been. It's supposed to be out this time last year or whatever. And he boiled down the amount of backers this thing had, and how many people had pre-ordered, and how many of those had pre-ordered 2 of them, and he tried to grind it down to real numbers. And the real numbers that he came up with were startlingly low. And he were talking about a second run of these, perhaps, if you had enough people. And even with that run, the numbers were very low. I mean, when I say low, I'm talking under 5,000. You know. And he got so it got me to thinking, what are in the real world, because you've got a lot of people are making commercial games for this thing right now. I hear about it a lot on this show and others. How many of these people are going to make dime one off this stuff, and how much money is there to be made? And I'm not saying stop right now, don't do it, because I'm sure some of it's a labor of love or whatever. But if you're looking to turn a nickel in the retro community, especially a community like, say, the Amiga, where pretty much all the games have been up for grabs for decades, you're looking at an uphill battle, aren't you? I mean, some of these guys are doing it. They're putting out games with new boxes and stuff.
Right. I think that you hit the nail on the head. One, software is vastly cheaper to produce than hardware, so your upfront costs aren't there. Number 2, you can sell a game based on the packaging. You can say, order the deluxe edition that's got the clamshell case or the steelbook or whatever, and people like that stuff. People like having something to put on their shelf. And you can keep the cost down. I think that people realize that if you can sell a new game for under $20, you're going to be able to please your fans because you're selling it for not too much, and 2, your manufacturing costs are going to be low because you're making either a floppy disk or a game. It's just not a lot to it.
Right.
And so you're going to be able to make some money. Now, nobody's getting rich, going to retire making homebrew games, but it's a way to make back some of the money that you spend doing something you love, not unlike the show that we're on right now.
It'll be interesting when the next, let's assume the next does ship at some point, because I'm telling you, after watching this other thing, I would be worried, because this is quite a tale.
Now, okay, I just want to make sure because I get confused a lot.
Okay.
The Vega is the handheld.
That's right.
The Next is the thing that looks like a Spectrum, except it's got a proper keyboard and like modern inputs.
That's right. That's
okay.
right. That's right.
Okay.
And I think it's the Vega. It's whatever the one is that they sent out that had all the hand painted buttons and everything. Assuming the Next ships, and I think it will. The guys at Retro Asylum are tight with the people making it, and they seem to act like they're just.
And we have several backers that are on our Discord. I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Chris Folds, I think, and maybe some others too.
So one would assume, that's going to come out, but I wonder. It'll be interesting to see what kind of market they have, because it's supposed to have some sort of way to have some sort of like Spectrum Next market that'll come out. It'll be interesting to see what can be done on there, because if they can put together a little cottage industry for local bedroom programmers to get back into it, and people are buying this stuff, it's almost like a pipe dream. It'd be glorious to have something like that happen. We've seen an uptick in Amiga Homebrew this year with nice packaging and some excellent stuff. We've really enjoyed most of what we played. And you just played. What was the thing you just played the other day?
So that was Rodman, and that was.
We didn't talk about that on the show, and I forgot about it.
And that was for the Specky.
That's what I thought.
Game, that was the future as an 8-bit. Tim, I can't think of Tim's last name, but Patreon supporter Tim.
You dug it, right?
Absolutely, it was a great game.
And I think we might have gotten into it last week, but I remember we talked about it at least in the private.
And one of the things that makes that so cool, and this is I don't know if this is a new development or not, but I'd never seen it, is they actually sell that game on a multi-format cassette. So it's only one cassette, but when you put it in a C64 tape drive, it will find the thing the C64 understands and display it. Put the same tape in a Spectrum, it works its magic on there. So that's awesome. That's really cool.
You just reminded me of something else.
Okay.
We're just going to keep going.
Let's keep going.
I was looking at YouTube last night, and they've released a new update for the C64 Mini. I'm turning the corner on the Mini.
Okay.
I'll be honest with you. and I'll tell you why.
Now, are you part of the YouTube community that is turning the corner? Do you see this happening with more and more people that are coming around?
I didn't. The only reason I knew that there was an update for it, well, I knew I keep up on this stuff, but Shane Monroe did a little video talking about the update. But they've done, this is the second update, because the U.S. version was an updated version. When this thing came out, adding games was a real hassle. You had to go through the C64 DOS and do so much stuff. And what they've done is they've actually made this thing, the interface is nice and smooth. This update that you just put out adds a game, which is awesome. You're getting a game.
Sure.
I mean, that right there sold me, and it's a good game. It's like a Galaga clone. And you're also getting they also have built it a way for you to use the keyboard as a second player.
Oh,
so if you've got
nice.
a keyboard hooked up, you can use it as a second player and do some hotkey stuff. I will give these guys credit. They put the C64 Mini out. It was obviously a success, and they didn't rest on their laurels. They've really been out there supported. This is the second update.
Well, I think they're resting. They're out there doing stuff because it was so broken from the get-go.
It wasn't broken.
Did you read any of the reviews when it first came out about the lag and the bad controls?
Listen, you can't fix that controller in BIOS. But
all I'm saying is, if this would have been a hit out of the gate, those guys would have been resting on their laurels.
Hey, it was a hit out. It was a hit out of the gate. It sold well. It sold very well. I ask anybody, and I have no doubt that we'll see a full-sized C64 Mini with the keyboard pretty soon.
At that point, it wouldn't really be Mini, though.
Then we'll get into the realm of using that keyboard, which I've got the Raspberry Pi and a C64, and the keyboard is that keyboard's a hassle. But I'll give them credit for adding a game. It never would have even occurred to me. And of course, you could do that with the C64 Mini because the games are so small.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do they deliver? Do they deliver it via SD card, the firmware update?
I think you can. I would assume. I didn't watch him actually install the update, but I think that's neat. I like it when a company goes out there and keeps the ball rolling on. And
that's the positive of the world that we live in, where you can patch things after they leave the factory.
Right. I mean, we always complain about that, but I mean, the C64, yes, it was not perfect, but the American version was a lot better. I mean, for one thing, it added instant access to your, game library with SD. It did a few things better. I mean, again, the stick they chose. I mean, let's face facts. It was a budgetary decision.
Sure.
The same thing with the arcade one-ups. They don't have the best controls. They certainly don't have the best spinners or whatnot. But it's nice to see them keep the ball rolling, and I think they've made enough money. I mean, that's clearly that was a unmitigated success, and I have no doubt that they're going to come back with something even better.
I would like to see a full-size C64. I mean, I am into vintage computers that have usable keyboards. If the Amiga ever came out with something like that, I'd be all over it. An Amiga 500 or 600 looking thing with an HDMI out and an SD card slot. I'm in business.
One thing, and I'll get more into this on the show. We can close with this. Speaking of the minis, last year I wholeheartedly predicted that we would see an Amiga Mini in the future. I didn't know if it would be this year. I won't predict it again because what we've seen this year from big business Amiga is that they can't play well together.
Right.
And so unless Colanto goes out, for example, and actually physically get somebody in Hong Kong or something to make these things and then slaps the name on it and puts them out there, I don't think they can play. I don't think they can get along well enough to put up a darn thing.
I agree with you.
And I think the C64 is a shining example that an Amiga Mini, not necessarily here, but in the UK and Europe, I think you would move some. I mean, if the Neo Geo got one, there's no reason the Amiga can't get one. And the Amiga was far more popular in the UK and Europe than the Neo Geo. Not over here, but over there.
Yeah, I just think it has to do with multiple companies owning different parts of the
Well,
whole.
I think I was thinking about it. There's enough Amiga software that's been released into the public domain where you could put together a pretty nice setup. If you go out and look, we've covered a bunch of stuff where they just gave away the code. I mean, you could probably work something out, and if you can get one or two big companies on board, if you can get the Psygnosis people on board, or the EA people, or somebody where you've got a bunch of games, even someone like Accolade, where you can put your test drives and your bar games, stuff like that on there, then you might have something.
Maybe so, and maybe they'll, the like Lafari says in the chat that the C64 Mini guys have hinted they're working on an Amiga Mini. Maybe the success of the C64 Mini was just what they needed to bring to these developers, saying, listen, you've got this stuff in your back catalog, we've proven that we can do this and make you some money.
Let me ask you a question. I know we said we're going to close, but I'm not done.
We can go all right, man.
Mini. Okay, we know there's an Atari 2600 Mini out there.
You mean like the flashback?
Yeah.
Okay.
And is there any legs for something? Because Atari's got this thing coming out. We've talked about this thing before, but it's been radio silence.
Are you talking about the Atari Box?
That's right.
Okay.
So are we going to ever see this thing?
I think it's still in development. It's just one of those things that they don't want to release something.
What's your confidence level at?
Low. I think I think it's got all the makings of another Ouya.
I mean, the Ouya did deliver something that was something playable. I mean,
yeah.
I had an Ouya.
And I have full confidence that the Atari will also, but at the price point that I think that they're going to go for, and the feature set that they have, I just don't see why someone would spend that kind of money. I think the way that Nintendo did this, it was perfect. You sell this thing for $50 or $60. It's got all the top games that you remember, and it's cute and it looks good and it ticks all your nostalgia buttons. If they can follow the same, how much does the C64 Mini go for? It's about the same, right?
Yeah, they're both up in the
between $50 and $70.
Well, I mean, I don't think either one of them are 50. I think they're both up in the $70 to $99.
The NES Classic
range.
was $59.99.
So it's not 50 either.
Right.
Nintendo looks better every day. And let's face facts. When they put these minis out, they had things that other places didn't have. They had built-in fans that would love all the old stuff, and they had collectors that'll buy anything that moves. Mm-hmm. Right? But they could have done what the PlayStation did and just put out a lump.
Right.
And Nintendo is not necessarily well known for their attention to detail on some of this stuff when it comes to online stuff or whatever. But they put a great interface in. The controllers were too short on the NES, but they worked. Mm-hmm. They were easy to use. The thing played all the games you wanted to play, and I'm taking the hacking out of it. And you know how I felt about it, but I mean, if you're going to have minis, if you're going to buy a mini, you want one that looks good, plays good, it saves all your games, and doesn't give you any crap.
Right.
All right. And they both do that. They look great. Everyone loves it, marveled at it. And on top of the fact that it had all the Nintendo properties, PlayStation, again, we've talked about this, but Sony didn't give a damn. They just probably sent this out to one of their weird eighth-party cabinets somewhere in the back of the building to put this thing together, and they just put out a dud.
Yeah.
And what it does is it actually, aside from the fact that you don't sell that many, it makes you look bad.
Sure.
That's the downside of it.
We talked about this a couple weeks ago in another context, but there is such a thing as damaging the brand through bad PR.
I mean, people have the PlayStation 4. I'm not going to say it's going to bring them down, but it makes you look like a jerk.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, why would you care so little about your back catalog? Mm-hmm. The Neo Geo, I'm not going to kill it as bad. I thought it was a stupid idea, but it's very Japanese, and the Japanese do things their own way, and this is what they came up with, a little cabinet. Mm-hmm. That's fine. But it is what it is. But they're inexcusable with the PlayStation. But I mean, the C64, you got to give the guys credit on that too. And it is very NES-like. I mean, the interface looks good. Mm-hmm. They put a lot of work into it. And it does exactly what you want it to do, and so including video options and stuff. And so kudos to them. Hey, I've turned around on this C64 Mini. I still, it's less stupid to me than some of these other minis, only because it's dealing with a C64 is a lot tougher than dealing with an NES, even in emulation.
Right.
You know. So I mean, good for them.
And so they've actually changed the code in some of the games to make them entirely joystick compatible.
Well, they've got an onboard keyboard. They've got an on-screen keyboard that comes up.
Okay.
That's why the joystick has all those extra buttons. They've got extra buttons you can use on there. But plus, you can plug in a USB keyboard. This stuff all goes away once you have a proper keyboard.
Sure.
And so that's the next step. They'll sell a ton of those. Mm-hmm. They'll absolutely sell as many as they want to sell, because clearly the C64 nostalgia is alive and well everywhere, because I know everyone loves it. I've not seen one of these things in the store locally. Have you ever seen one?
Never.
So, and I've looked. So that's kind of.
I did see a arcade 1-up my first time. Saw one in Walmart today. They've got it at the Hurricane Walmart now.
Yeah,
got a Pac-Man machine there.
They've got them. Is it out for?
It's out for play.
Yeah. Did you try it?
There was a guy with a baby in one hand playing Pac-Man in the other hand. So
yeah,
I did not disturb him.
It's funny. There's a separate arcade community building up to these. It's sort of a 1-up arcade community that have these things. And they've been ostracized by the arcade people, and so they've kind of got their own thing going, and good for them. You know? I think with proper modification and care,
and they seem to be doing the
fine.
right thing, again, because they made some mistakes out of the gate, but like selling or giving away the plexiglass cover to people who had the sort of bad, control panel paint and stuff like that. So, I mean, and I hope they continue. I want to see as long as it doesn't interfere with my ability to play MAME games on my MAME cabinet totally illegally.
Yeah.
I want to see the arcade scene thrive. I want to see a million of these arcade 1-up cabs. I want to see a Mr. Do one. I'd buy one, at the right price with all the Mr. Do games on it, looking cool.
Oh man, the problem is you've got horizontal. Well, I know it's not a problem for you, but you've got horizontal and vertical Mr. Do's in there. That much said. I would love to see, if we're going to talk about dream wishes, I'd like to see a Turbo Graphics Mini that includes some of the CD games.
Man, I think that would be, and that thing sold so well in Japan, I wouldn't be surprised if something like that
I've been playing a lot of PC Engine / Turbo Graphics stuff this week, and it's great. I've been playing the hell out of Blazing Lasers, and it's such a fun game. They've got a lot of good stuff on there. I've been playing a lot of N64. Both those are ripe for the picking. So if they do an N64 one, I'm sure you can gather up, 15, 20 games to put on there that people would like. So,
yeah. All right. I guess we're done.
That's it. Adios.